What time is it? It's Packard Folks at time. Hat? Check. Shirt? Check. Pants? Optional. Mug? Double check. Check us out at cafepress.com/PackardPokesat where you can get all this great merchandise and more.
Do you like Packard Pokesat and want to hear it on demand and on the go? Download the free app today at Stitcher.com. Available on iOS, Android, Nook, and iPad.
This is Packard Pokesat, and I'm poking at your news. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another fine edition of Packard Pokesat. I am your immutable and unmutable host, Packard Sonic, and tonight is our OK Let's Talk. We're going to be discussing the difference between human rights and robotic rights. I mean, this is coming up, actually. The bones of the matter are AI is becoming a thing. It is becoming more and more of a thing. There's a video, I heard about it earlier this week, and I just saw it today for the first time. It's a video of a robot. It's literally jumping several feet into the air, and then it literally jumps up like 5 feet on top of a platform, and then it turns around, and then it does a backflip off of it, and it's amazing. It's just amazing. I can't do that. That's amazing that it can do that stuff without it falling over. Eventually, we're going to be getting robots where they look more like us. Where do we start drawing the line? And do we need to draw a line? Basically, you're either a person or your property. So when do we start blurring the lines between person and property when it comes to robots? Okay, let's talk. Tony, what do you think?
I don't know what to make of this because I'm pretty sure if AI continues as going as advanced as it could be, they could be taking over factory jobs, and there's probably not a lot of humans that's going to like that.
Well, factory jobs are already taken over by a lot of robots as it is right now. There are a lot of menial jobs that have been taken over by robots, like spray painting, places in factories that are hazardous for humans to be working where they can get cancer or whatever.
Yeah, but I mean, not like Sophie.
Yes.
I'm talking about like those type of robots that, let's be honest, factory workers aren't even going to have to pay them.
Mm-hmm. Well, they still have to buy them, as it were, There's still going to be some robotics there. And in a lot of places you may not even expect. You call up, let's say your cable company, and you're talking to a robot, and you can tell that it's a robot. I mean, at least not robot in that sense. It's a automated system, but it can respond to verbal commands. Now, when do we draw the line between saying that this thing has rights at that point?
That is the million-dollar question in my mind. The only possible way I can think of AI even having rights is if it's vandalized, is if the AI robot itself is maybe vandalized. That's really the only time I can think of getting any kind of rights.
Well, that wouldn't be the rights for the robot, because if it's vandalized, let's just say it belongs to somebody, that would be no different than, say, I can beat up your car. It doesn't give the car rights because I've beaten it up. It's still your property at that point.
Oh, yeah, I mean, I completely agree on that. That's the only way I can see it, getting any sort of right like that,
Okay, let's look at this backwards. Let's say we take a human, you, me, anybody, and I have my right side is in an accident and I have to have a prosthetic. Do I still have human rights, even though I have a prosthetic?
Yes.
Okay, let's say I have to have my legs replaced or my hips replaced or anything like that. Let's just say it's all my limbs. Do I still have rights at that point?
I mean, something like that, sure. I mean, because and pardon me for putting it so bluntly, but you still have, obviously, your human brain and human consciousness.
Okay, let's say the technology is available and they can take my brain and they can stick it into an artificial body. There's no biologics left, just the brain. Do I still have human rights at that point? Am I still a human?
Well, if you just ask my personal opinion, yes, because the brain is obviously still biologically a part of you, even though it's in another body.
Okay, let's say we have a brain that was based on biologics and there was no human inhabiting it, but we've somehow been able to give it consciousness and stick it into a robot or whatever.
Dead brain or something?
Yeah, let's just say, I'm going to pull a Star Trek phrase, a positronic brain, like Commander Data from the show. At that point, does it have human rights at that point?
That is a good question. Ugh, I really don't know what to say to something like that. Me personally, I would have to say no in that scenario, because the brain is, even though you're putting a brain into it, the brain is still dead.
It's not dead. It is a living brain, and it's got biologics. It's being programmed.
I mean, if it's being programmed, then, to me, that's not human. I mean, you can't really program a human.
Well,
to some extent, I mean.
To a major extent, no.
Yeah.
But you can, mess with people's minds and everything like that to make them think certain things.
I agree with that.
Matt, you haven't chimed in on this. What do you think?
You know, when you're talking about rights or human rights for AI,
Mhm.
they're not human.
Okay.
They're robots. So I don't know how they can be considered human per se.
Let me ask you this. If a robot has the minimum amount of consciousness, would that give it the same rights as a human at that point? I mean, if it could think on its own, obviously, and it can express desires like we can, is it still a machine at that point, or is it something different?
It's something different because it doesn't have feelings like a human being.
How do you know? How do you know for sure? Let's just-
Basically, it's a computer.
We are too.
Right, but we don't have microchips and all that stuff.
That's why I was getting at when I was asking Tony earlier. If I stick my brain into a mechanical body, I do have microchips and things like that at that point. And speaking of that, let me just bring that back a little bit. Let's just say I have something to keep my heart going, and that's got microchips in it. Does that make me less human then all of a sudden because there's microchips and it's going into my body like a pacemaker?
No, because it's helping the human body.
Okay.
It's just a machine that is helping the human body.
Okay. So if my brain is inside a robot, then I'm still human at that point. There's no body it's helping at that point. It's just keeping my brain alive.
If that can actually happen, yes. Putting a human brain into a machine, I don't think that would work.
And let's just say that it did. Let's just say that we can put a human brain into a robotic body. Are we still human at that point? Let me put it like this. Let's just say that I get into a major car accident. I'm going to be a vegetable. But they can transfer my consciousness out of my head completely and put it into an electronic brain. And everything that's me, my memories and everything like that, is now inside a machine. I mean, from top to bottom, from the tip of my toes to the top of my head and everything in between, it's all completely robotic at that point. Am I still human at that point? If it has my consciousness.
I guess it could be.
So having consciousness would be the factor of having rights at that point?
I mean, yeah, because I mean, if we're talking about just plain AI where we just program whatever we want into it, I mean, at that point, it's no different from a computer.
Okay. What if the computer was able to program itself, I mean, over time? Like my phone, for example. They've put enough technology into it where if I start typing certain words, it starts remembering those are my preferred words and they start bringing those up. So it's developing a memory at that point. It's not AI like we're discussing here, but I mean, it does develop a memory and it's growing as, I wouldn't say an individual, because you know how we always say, like, you work with a computer, it's like, oh, well, this computer seems to have this weird personality all of its own because it doesn't work like a computer that came fresh from the factory. It's got its little quirks, it's got little bumps, you know, it won't run certain programs when it should have, you know, things like that.
Consciousness is one thing, but I mean, what if we, in the hypothetical scenario that we're all talking about here, what if we were to, I guess, kind of program it with emotions? Would that still count?
That's actually a good question. What if we did? Let's just say that we did program it with the ability to express emotions, but we don't program it to know when to do these certain emotions, and it has to learn when those emotions take place. If you think about it, every human being learns this trait. Babies pick up on these traits very easily. Like if you're smiling, they see you happy, they will see that and they reflect that back at you. So you're kind of programming them at that point to say, hey, this facial expression is a happy one. Or if you get a, let's say, a terrified look, like you're making a scary face, they get scared. I think that part of it, I think that's more reactionary. Let's say we could get them to be programmed to be reactionary to different things. And I've seen some video where they actually had produced, well, it's just a head right now, but it can take and look at your face and it can scan, like if you're making a smiley face, it'll smile back at you. If you're making a frowny face, it'll look sad as well or frowny back. So it picks up on the social cues just from our faces alone.
I don't know how exactly we would give that kind of scenario rights exactly, but the only thing that would enter my mind when considering giving it rights is just probably the consciousness, and I wouldn't mind giving it emotions, just not, you know, too much of it, if that makes any sense, because I mean, this may be the paranoid sci-fi fan in me, but I don't think anything good would come of giving AI emotions.
So you don't want to like have a female robot go ballistic on you, right?
Hey, I'm just saying, look what happened to Skynet. Look what happened to iRobot.
Yeah. Or have you ever seen the movie AI?
Yes, I have.
Or here's another one that there's another good movie, Millennial Man.
It sounds familiar. I don't think I've seen it.
No, I haven't seen that.
That one's with Robin Williams. He starts out as a complete android.
Oh,
And
that. Yes, I've seen it.
okay, Matt, does that sound familiar to you?
No, I've never seen the movie.
Okay. Basically, he starts out as a robot. He just brought from the factory, and the daughter is kind of a real jerk to the robot at first, but it learns and it tries to eventually try to get human status. It takes 200 years, but he finally does it. But he's able to change certain parts of his body so he can be more human, so he can take in food, he can have flatulence,
All like a farting robot.
Yeah, and there's actually a fart joke in the movie too. So, and he falls in love too. So, what if a robot could fall in love, or you could fall in love with a robot? Do you think that would be enough for you to perceive it as a human at that point? I'm not saying like you're sex toy or anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, if we're talking about something like Bicentennial Man, which is what something like the Robin Williams movie, I would consider that absolutely giving it rights.
Okay.
If we're talking about something like the movie I just brought up, I, Robot, something like that, probably not.
Yeah, no, iRobot is a good example of that too. With that one, that they put all the old robots like in shipping containers. Sorry if there's anybody that hasn't seen it, spoilers, but they put them all in shipping containers, like they were going to get rid of them or just let them just die off or whatever. But I mean, I think that the biggest takeaway from that would be that between humans and robots can just replace their parts, and they could virtually go on indefinitely. Where humans, we're born, we live, then we die. So I think that reason why we have to give humans rights over robots, because they can just keep going. But we'd have to create special laws for that too. And if we have to give them laws, do you think that maybe because of the laws that we have to give them to follow, as it were, that they would have to have rights as well to correspond with that?
Well, it's like the Terminator.
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 Like
Terminator 2, how he was really human, or, he was a robot, but
yeah,
human, more or less.
Yeah.
But stuff like that, I mean, that's pretty scary. I mean, you don't want this to get out of hand to where people or these robots are destroying people,
Yeah. Well, that's always, the apocalyptic version of what robots would be.
Yeah, but you never know. I mean...
Well, I mean, here's a question, though, and I'm actually getting this from the movie I, Robot.
Okay.
One of the laws is that no matter what, I'm saying in the movie, which we've all seen, but to our audience who hasn't, one of the laws was that they were not allowed to harm humans ever. I think the better question is, would one of the rights we give these AI robots, is it one of the rights we give them self-defense against humans or even other AIs? That's
one of the supposed 3 laws, actually, that they can't hurt a human even by inaction or by action or inaction. So if you're attacking the robot, it can't defend itself to save its own life, as it were. So that would be one of the 3 laws. I mean, I'm kind of paraphrasing. So, everybody back off on your keyboard saying, no, Packard, that's not what it says. I'm just kind of paraphrasing here. But one of the laws is that it has to protect human life. I've also seen some counterpoints on that quite a long time ago. I don't remember them off the top of my head, and why those 3 laws are actually kind of screwed up. But if an AI has consciousness, or what we consider to be consciousness, would it have to have the ability to have rights? I mean, as it were. I mean, I know I keep coming back to that question, but I mean, we seem to be kind of stuck past that point.
Like I said, I would consider, well, I definitely would give it rights if it had some form of a conscience, whether it's a human programs that into it or not. Also emotions, and like I said, call me crazy, but I think an AI robot definitely should have the right to defend itself even against another human.
That gets very tricky at that point, because if we give it the ability to defend itself, as you say, and it could harm a person at that point, if it has the ability to harm somebody, then we should have the ability to, put it into custody, I guess, at that point. I mean, if it came down to that. But if it's making decisions on its own to hurt somebody when it doesn't know the difference between, like, say, how some people will just, kind of punch each other. They're not, it's not a combative gesture. I mean, it's not like you're going to attack somebody. It's just like, hey, it's like, good job or whatever, or just kind of goofing around. But if the robot doesn't know the difference between those 2 things, then it will maybe overreact.
I do see that point, but at the same time, I mean, isn't the point of AI kind of like a learning computer,
Yeah, I would imagine so.
Okay, well, then that's one of the things that, we teach it. At least that's what I would do.
Well, how do we teach that exactly? Because it is a little difficult, even for people, to know the difference between a friendly gesture and something that's like, hey, I'm going to knock your block off, because they don't give all the personal cues that are going on.
While we are poking at your news, you can poke us at Facebook and Twitter, or poke us with an email at ppapodcast@gmail.com, or leave us a message at 662-709-PPAP. Join us live on YouTube/Packard Pokesat on Friday nights at 9 p.m. Central Time. Be part of the conversation by live chatting with us during the show. Enjoy the show? Help support us by becoming a monthly patron at patreon.com/Packard Pokesat, or look awesome by buying something at cafepress.com/Packard Pokesat. No money, no problem. You can help us by sharing the show with friends and rate us on iTunes and Stitcher. For everyone that shares and rates us, you kick ass.
The Atheists,
The Bible.
and No Wardrobe, the podcast.
Wait a minute. No wardrobe? You mean we're going to be naked while we do this?
Well, seeing how I'm an atheist and I'm reading the Bible, and since clothes are flammable,
Fire! Fire! Fire!
I thought it might be a good idea to take them all off first.
Naked or not, follow along as we read, analyze, and try to keep you from falling asleep as we go through this boring-ass book.
Find us on iTunes, Stitcher, and Spreaker. Who knows? We may even be on YouTube someday.
Well, I mean, me personally, I would probably say and this may sound dumb, I would say like the strength of the punch. Because, I mean, if you and I are hanging out in a bar and I just, went up and tapped you on your arm, not that hard, I'm not actually punching you. I'm just saying, hey, what's up?
Okay, so we're judging it by the amount of force being exerted against the machine or whatever, or being exerted overall.
Yes, at least that's what I would do if I was creating these things.
Okay.
Or teach it.
Okay. So in the long and short of it, I mean, sorry, I'm going back here a little bit. So if we put a human brain into a robotic body, then that makes it sentient at that point, and that gives it human rights. What if I take a human foot and put it on a robot? Does that give it human rights then because it's got a human foot on it?
I'd have to say no. Like, again, just my personal standard, anything with a conscience of its own or emotions of its own.
Okay.
That's kind of my bar.
Okay. Here's another example. Let's just say we could do the brain swap thing. And let's say that we take a robotic brain and we stick it into a human. And there's no programming. There's no consciousness to switch into it. It's just we've cloned a human body and we decide to put, instead of the squishy gray matter in there, we put in a completely robotic brain. Does that have human rights at that point? Let's just say it's 95% human and it's that 5% that's not human.
If in that specific scenario, if it can, again, have its own emotions and have ascensions, then I would say yes.
Okay. We had a comment from the chat room from Practical Magic 9. Thank you for your comment. She says, well, why wouldn't the AI robot have knowledge of all human phrasing and gestures, also be a learning AI? That's a possibility. We could program it like that. I mean, like I said with the example, the head that can see human gestures and, react back to them.
I agree with that.
So we would give that robot, like I said, it's 95% human and it's got like 5% mechanical brains. It's all mechanical brain. Then it gets human rights at that point?
Overall, I would have to say yes. Like I said, just my personal opinion, if it gets specific person, quote unquote, can have a sentience on its own and make, have its own emotions, then sure.
Okay. Matt, what do you think? If we have a robot that's 95% human and then 5% robot, just the brain, do you think that deserves to have human rights at that point?
I don't know. I don't think I can answer that.
You're just kind of unsure at that point.
Right.
Okay. All right. Where would your line be drawn? I mean, would it have to be 99% human? Would it have to be 100% human?
Well, the thing is, even though, yes, the body would be human, but the brain would not be human.
Right.
And I guess I'm going on the fact on how the human brain works versus a robotic brain.
Okay.
I mean, it would be the body couldn't function.
Let's just say that we could make that happen where the body and the brain would work together, and it's 90, like I said, 95% human, and that last 5% is the brain, and the brain is able to do that. We got to kind of step out of the realm of what we have now to what could be at that point, because we are getting closer and closer to that all the time. I mean, we have ways now, right now, where we can stick together microchips and human gray matter together to do certain things. Like, let me get more generic on this. They've hooked up, I don't know if this monkey had its arm cut off or it was already removed by, disease or whatever, but they were able to wire the monkey with a mechanical arm so it could, pick up treats or do whatever it wanted to just by thinking about it, and it's wired into his brain, so it's taking command from his brain. So that's not completely out of the spectrum of reality.
Right, but it's connected to a human brain, though. I mean, that's or the brain of the monkey or whatever it was.
Yeah, in that example, yeah, it would be connected to the monkey at that point. But if let's just say we've married the two technologies together, or let's just say that we've not only taken a mechanical brain and we've programmed it, but we've also limited it to, let's say, somebody that's like, I don't know, an average Joe. They're just going to have a dead end job like everybody else, but like mopping floors or whatever. Does it have human rights at that point too? I mean, because it is 95% human at that point,
I guess.
So if the brain is limited, and even though it's mechanical and it has some kind of AI on it, then it's considered to be human, and then it gets human rights,
I guess.
So we're talking about the amount of intelligence that the robot would have, or the abilities it would have, to where it would be the difference between being consciousness or whatever versus going above that and being, smarter than us and being able to do more than us just from, the brain.
You got me there.
We had another quick comment from the chat room here from Boolander. I apologize if I've messed up your name. He says AI programming isn't as simple as Boolean logic. If it can learn to adapt and its emotions develop over time as a survival trait, which is key, then that could be considered evolution. That's a good point.
Yeah.
So we could actually be creating a new species at that point.
Right.
So if we create a new species, then it should get the same rights as humans, or do we have to give it different rights for that species to exist? Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I was gonna say, yeah, probably different rights. I mean, like in the same way that cats and dogs have rights in a way in this country. I mean, obviously we have like animal cruelty laws.
So we'd have to come up with robot cruelty laws. There's a great show. It's from the BBC. It's called Humans. There are some AIs that they're trying to create, trying to get out the programming to everybody, all the other robots, so they can express themselves, do painting or whatever, but they're still considered to be machines at that point. But they want to eventually get their own rights. It's only had a couple of seasons. It's a great show if you ever get a chance to watch it.
Yeah.
Never heard of it.
Oh, well, it's a good show. You should watch it sometime. This is a great question from Boolander. Thank you again for your comment, which leads to the question, are we creating a race of slaves? That's also a great question, actually, because, if we're creating a race, are we going to make them a slave race to us?
Well, that's true, but also, are they going to negatively respond to that? Are they going to feel that they're being treated like slaves?
That's an interesting question. If we don't program them to say, hey, you have to go pick up groceries, all the time, walk in the rain or whatever, rain, snow, or whatever, and they just have to do it because we said so. I mean, but they don't know any different. Is that still slavery at that point?
Right. That's the biggest question, because if you tell somebody to do something, like if you're a boss and you're delegating duties to people, and a human could say, oh, well, no, I'm not going to do that, for whatever reason. And if you're telling robots to do that, they're just going to go ahead and do it because that's what they're programmed to do.
Yeah, but I mean, if
they're not going to argue with you, is the point I'm trying to say.
Okay, yeah, no, I see that. I totally see that. But if they have rights, when they have the right to say no,
it depends on how they're programmed.
Okay,
if they're programmed to do that, to respond like humans, then I'm sure they would. But if they're not programmed to respond like humans, then no.
Okay, we had one last comment here from the chat room. Well, a couple of comments here actually from Practical Magic 9. Again, thank you for your comments. She asks, what constitutes life/consciousness, self-awareness, and do bots, AI, have self-actualization? That goes to your example there, where you said you tell the robot to go do a thing and it just does the thing.
Yeah, well, I mean, if we don't and this may sound dumb, but if we don't program it to think it is a slave, then
Yeah. Well, this is it's a very deep question for that.
Yeah, it really throws you for a loop, that's for sure.
Yeah,
I mean, but then again, I mean, if you think about it, if these AIs are going to be learning computers, it doesn't really matter whether we program them to think they're a slave or not. They're probably just going to pick it up on their own.
That's possible. Again, another good question from Practical Magic 9. Again, thank you for your comment. She says, do we allow or /program the AI to think for themselves? We kind of brought that up earlier.
I would have no problem with that.
Yeah. And another comment from Boolander says they have already developed their own language. Yes, they have. Robots kind of already have their own language. I mean, all computers have their own language. They're already talking to each other. We're just the monkeys behind the keyboard pushing the buttons to talk to each other. But they already communicate. Yeah, but they're already communicating with each other the way it is.
You kind of wonder who are the robots.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So anyway, I hate to cut this short. This is starting to get really interesting, but we do have to get going. If you'd like to make a donation to the show, you can go to paypal.me/PackardPokesat and make a direct donation to the show. If you would like to make a per episode donation, you can go to patreon.com/PackardPokesat. Well, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt the show with a begging for money. One last thing here before we go. Ranger, what do you think? Robots, should we eventually give them human rights? I mean, at some point in their history. I mean, because it's going to happen. I mean, as far as them becoming more human-like, anyway.
My answer is yes, but I think as to what rights to give them, that's the discussion that needs to be had.
Yes, that's a good point. Matt,
I would have to agree with that too.
Oh, okay, good. That saves me from asking the same question. All right. Well, we're going to get out of here. Again, I want to thank everybody for coming, and we're taking off next week. There will be no midweek show, and there will be no Friday show next week because of the holiday. And another quick programming note, because of my limited time and limited availability for the next month, there will be no midweek show. We are still going to be putting out a staff meeting episode and a Friday show, but there will be no regular midweek show for the month of December and maybe part of January. It all depends on how my schedule works out for now. So, of course, that may change. In the meantime, we will be back every Friday through the month of December. So, and of course, check out The Atheist, the Bible, and No Wardrobe. That one will be out even next week. So that one is not going on hiatus at all. So there will still be The Atheist, the Bible, and No Wardrobe episode next week as well at its usual time. All right. We'll see you in December. Good night, everybody.
And that's a wrap.